Hey guys, welcome back to Exotic Car Hacks, and today on this great episode of Exotic Car Hacks, we're going to be looking at clowns. That's right, I would draw a clown emoji, I'm not very good at it, and clearly you can see from my cup how much I care about people's opinions, which is why today we're going to be talking about these clowns on social media and how can they actually afford cars. Now, there have been a lot of talk lately, especially as we saw more and more cartoon characters come out of the woodworks buying very expensive cars, from Pistas to Scions to Bugatti Pure Sports and basic Bugattis. And we're starting, some of them are even buying Sennas, and we're starting to kind of wonder, how is it that they're doing that? Are they making that much money? So we've previously done a breakdown of why people like Wes Watson barely are basically just throwing money away, buying Bugattis they can't afford, and if you've caught the latest videos that are on the internet, it's actually shown that he's trying to sell this car that he's now upside down in. Funny story though, and I'm gonna take a sip of I don't give a shit with this cup. For those of you that can't read what it says the tears of the people I have offended are the ones I'm drinking from, but let's take a moment and talk about this because we did a very, very intricate video on Wes Watson's Bugatti and why it was a total fucking context of pissing money away. We said he was going to lose roughly $2 million driving this piece of shit car. The car itself was very nice, but basically the deal was a disaster. It was like a $2 million down, you know, $60K a month type of deal. And it didn't make any sense. And so it's basically one of these like long-term indirect rental agreements. And so what ended up happening is he's not renting his car, he's buying it. But historically, we're going to now break down how these concepts work on the internet, because what happens is you get one cartoon character that basically buys a car that other people on the surface or on the outside look at and they go, that's impossible, how can he afford this car? Like, he's barely been famous for like X amount of time, how is he getting this? And then what happens is the other clowns who also use the same strategies come out of the woodwork trying to explain the opposite to make all the people they call haters, when they're really just curious individuals who truly are correct to be curious because they actually are wondering how it's possible, but they're basically coming out and saying, no, here's this big story about what they're doing and they're making all this money, and it's all bullshit anyways. So since we did the thing on Wes Watson, a lot of people came back out after that and saying that, oh shit, this is really amazing, I now understand this whole concept of equity versus just monthly payments, and I understand why these idiots are making such bad moves. But what actually occurred is we got called out by Wes for being cartoon characters, for putting that shit and we don't know what we're talking about, and thank God the market's up, but yet he's trying to sell that Bugatti now. Literally got caught by this other guy like Bravo, this Johnny Bravo or something on YouTube. We'll link the video below because you got to watch it, where basically he's trying to sell his car for $1 million under what he paid for it, and he's trying to sell it at this dealership, this third-party dealership, pretending it's not his car by just having them literally Photoshop his VIN on another car, so nobody knows that he's trying to sell his car. So he's not financially doing well, and as a result of that, it's basically liquidating the car. But it's bringing me back to my original context that he's going to lose $2 million in his car. And if you add up all the payments, the down payments and everything is paid, he's going to lose over $2 million in his car. So what I'm trying to tell you guys to understand is that people lie all the time, but money doesn't. So people can tell you all kinds of bullshit about their life and everything there is to know about, you know, how they bought the car or whatever, but money doesn't actually lie. What or how money works isn't actually like going to change because someone is telling you a story or not. So we're going to kind of look at that and what kind of deals are out there so people can kind of understand what happens in the car space and how people can afford things. So if you're a conventional thinker, typically the way you look at things is you look at everything as a down payment plus a 60-month loan. So this is a conventional thinker looking at an exotic car market. So you typically go, well, how much down payment do you need? Generally, like you do on a regular Kia, you go 20%, and then you go, what's the payment on 60 months, you know, like based on what's left, and that's how you look at it in a simple term loan. That's how people buy Kias. That's not how people buy exotics. And that's not how they finance exotics. So this is very true. If you're a conventional car buyer, this is how you think because you follow some of these idiots like Dave Ramsey and stuff on the internet, and you somehow think this is the financially smart way to do it while you're sucking dick to banks and not getting it. So let's just take this out of the equation, because if you're doing that, you're equally an idiot and it's not going to change what you learn from this video. But Real exotic car buyers, when they're buying exotic cars, typically don't need to take on a huge payment because the cars, in most cases, retain some level of equity if they're bought conventionally normal. Now, most lenders, like Woodside Credit or some of these bigger lenders, do require 20%, but they'll stretch the loan out to 144 months. So the payments aren't that high, and their interest rate is not astronomical either. It's like 7 to 10%, which is just about 1 to 3% higher than a conventional loan. Now, in your head, you might think, well, this doesn't make sense. You're paying so much interest. But rich people don't pay off cars. They actually don't own their cars long enough. So just so you understand, like as an avid collector that's owned over 300 exotics and currently owns a $30 million car collection, many hypercars, not one, and have financed plenty of cars in the past, now I own all my cars cash, I can tell you, and I teach this on the internet, so like I've been teaching this for 20 years. So this is basically how exotic car loans work today for most people. So low payment because it's stretched over 144 months, non-depreciating, so you're basically losing the interest each month, 20% down for equity. But here's the thing with these loans, just so you understand. Car loans like these don't happen for Bugattis, and they don't happen for $2 to $3 million cars. These loans usually have a cap for the most part around 1 million. Now there are some companies like Riz Lending that's starting to do more with 20, 30% down, but the point is the majority of these companies look at $1 million cap, not for the car, but the financed amount. So you could have a $4 million car, you need 3 million down. There's also something different. In most conventional like lending companies like this, they look for a couple of things. They look at your credit and they want to see that you've previously held exotic cars like these at a lower rate. So if you want to buy $1 million loan, you previously have to have had like a 400K or 500K loan before so you can kind of go up. Well, most influencers don't want to start at 400K or 500K cars because right now in Miami, you're basically a peasant if you drive a Huracan. So you have to start thinking that they want SVJs, they want Sennas, they want stuff. So they're going to have to either put huge amounts of money down, but here's the second problem. Not only they don't have the credit, and when I say they don't have the credit, it doesn't mean they have bad credit. They might have excellent credit, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Not only they have to have good credit, but they have to have comparable car credit, which they don't have because they start at the top. But in addition to that, they have to have other things too, such as the ability to get insurance. How do you think someone that's 22 or 23 is going to get insured in South Florida when they previously have owned a normal 200K car, now they want a $3 million car, and it's not going to add up. So there is a lot of roadblocks to a person coming in, even if you have a hefty amount of cash, and saying, I just want to have a $3 million car, and every bank should be kissing my ass because I'm putting $1 million down. It doesn't really work that way. Then the other thing is also remember, these types of loans are based on taxable income. So they are based on paperwork, which means that you have to have tax returns for years showing you have significant amounts of money coming in order to be able to take out $1 million loan secured by a car. The bank wants to protect its car, and they want to ensure the person buying it can get the right insurance, has the right type of taxable income, and of course, has the credit to be able to buy it. So these loans are conventionally how my students, for example, at Exotic Car Hacks, they go from 200K to 400K, then they go to 600K, eventually 1 million, and on and on and on. This is what we call conventional lending for exotic cars. So it's a spread out car payment, it's much smaller, the rate's fair, and this is also, even though the interest is somewhat front loaded because you have a higher dollar amount, this is just generically a more systematic approach to real exotic car ownership, not so much like I want to front exotic car dealership. So if you're thinking about like, I'm a normal human, I'm going to buy my first exotic car and I'm going to evolve, that's a lot of what we teach at Exotic Car Hacks and how to do this so it's obviously not breaking the bank, picking the right cars that don't depreciate, etc. But there is a need to go from cheap to higher. And you can't start at the SVJ level unless you're some kind of physician making $2 million a year, and at which point a bank looks at physicians or lawyers slightly differently, but the majority of people are not going to be able to, even if they're very successful internet marketers, go into $1 million car just because they have a 20% down payment. So conventional banks won't even do these loans, specialty banks won't do them because they're not the right person. So now we understand how exotic car lending actually works, right? Okay, so you guys get that part now. Hopefully you're not confused. Now let's take a look at how leasing works, because leasing is a little bit different too, and it becomes a little bit more open-ended, and then we'll look at the long-term rental agreement contracts that exist for a lot of influencers out there. So let's look at leasing. Leasing has two types of leases. Conventional leases that you think about are typically the ones you walk in Lamborghini, you put 100K down, and then you pay your monthly payment for like a year or whatever it is, and then at the end of the lease, you end up returning the lease. That's what we call a close-ended lease, and that's primarily created by manufacturers for dealers that sell that specific brand to basically get their cars out there that they can't sell. So leasing is a way to buy leftover cars that don't sell very well at aggressive patterns while allowing you write-offs. Now, in the world of exotic cars, we have what we call open leasing. So open leasing is a little bit different. Now, not every open leasing company is a scam, but the majority of them are very borderline unethical. What open leasing is they'll basically give you some kind of down payment and some kind of plus lease cost inception. And these things, basically these fees, etc., will go to the lease company. And what they'll do is they'll take your payment and they'll amortize it, for example, for how long you want the lease, 2 years, 3 years, 6 years. But in order for you not to have a huge monthly payment, they'll use what they call a balloon payment. A balloon payment is basically the same as if you return the car, except they're not going to take your car. Instead of you saying, hey, I'm done paying my lease, and now I'm going to go ahead and give you back the car, it doesn't really work that way. The balloon payment is the last amount that the car is going to be worth based on your lease. So if in 2 years it's worth, let's say you buy a car for 400K, in 2 years it's worth 200K, the balloon payment will be 200K at the end of the 2 years, and the 2-year amount of money you pay will be a bunch of lease fees combined with a down payment and monthly payment to end up at the balloon payment at the end of the 2 years. The goal of these leases is to allow you to have a smaller payment and to do a lease on a car that isn't manufacturally available as a lease. However, you want that car, it's used or new, etc. It makes sense for them to do a lease. Now, there's a few issues with these types of payments. The first one is these can work for people that generally use this correctly, and there are some companies that do a good job at offering lease models that are non-scammy. That's fine. Those companies basically charge you a lot of fees and have a easy time showing you your amortization, so at any given time you know exactly what you owe if you decide to pay off your car earlier. And they'll also expose all their fees and anything else to you, so you know exactly what it will cost you. However, the majority of these not so accredited lease companies that offer these payments don't do that. They are a lot more relaxed on credit and generally take much larger down payments up front to guarantee they can repo cars. In addition to that, while they offer a balloon payment, they don't offer an amortization between this and this. So almost during the entire time you own this car and you think you're paying down your principal, they never gave you an amortization schedule. So they're hoping because no one else will give you a loan, you'll go with them because they'll approve you because it's easier. So people that are basically have good credit generally, but perhaps have not comparable car credit, and somehow have convinced themselves that writing off their payment through this makes sense, typically go for things like these and they don't investigate them enough, and they look at a monthly payment, a balloon payment, and a down payment. They go, I can afford it, and they're approving me, so I'm going that way. Typically, these leases are very expensive because they're very, very heavy interest loaded. I know leases don't have interest, but they're very, very heavy fee loaded. And as a result of that, they end up costing you a ton of money by the time you get to your balloon payment. So at any given time, even though you've given a large down payment, etc., it's very likely that you're upside down on the loan from the very first day despite the large down payment. Because remember, conventionally, when you're getting these type of products over the first type we talked about, you don't have much leverage in negotiating a car. As a matter of fact, you have almost none because you just found a place that will give you the loan, even though most places won't. And if you're a young influencer, you typically think to yourself, I'm going to go and get this because no one else will give me the loan on the Huracan because I'm 20 years old. I'm just making some money with some passive stuff, or I'm doing some OnlyFans or whatever I'm doing, and I'm not actually making any real money that's taxable or showable on my income. So since I can't prove my income, maybe these programs allow stated income because they're counting on you to default so they can repo the cars. if they're selling you a Huracan that costs $210K wholesale, that's the dollar you should pay to be able to drive it for free. They're selling it to you at $260K and you're putting $100K down. That means they're basically saying, if you have that $100K, we'll give you a payment structure, but at that moment, they're in a positive equity position on the car immediately. So the moment you default, they want that car back because they can make an extra $50K and wipe all your fees. They count on you failing, which is why it's very dangerous. And often if a conventional bank or lender that's good is underqualifying you for a car, you need to start looking at lower end cars till you build your car credit to allow you to go up. So you might lose 6 months, but you won't lose 6 years of income doing this. But there's worse than this. This is actually not the worst. This is the gray area, borderline, scammy, non-scammy approach. I'm gonna show you now what the guys do in the longer term stuff that becomes even worse. So now you guys know that there's obviously a usury law, which means, you know, in any given lender contract, you can't charge more than any heavy amount of interest, which means that if you want to charge, for example, over 30% a year in interest, you know, even at like hard money, I think is between like 15 and 30%. But let's say you want to charge more than like 27%. I don't know what the exact percentage is off the top of my head, but let's say you want to charge over that. Obviously you can't, because if you give someone a contract for that, they could technically go after you. So remember what I just told you when I said leases don't really have interest. They're calculated based on an interest amount, but they're also disguised as lease fees. So then you have one thing that's worse than the lease, and that's what we call the long-term rentals. So long-term rentals are basically the way some dealers get away from not having to basically get any type of accountability on their interest rates, because they want to charge huge amounts of money to people who would not be able to get approved anywhere else. And they basically consider this almost like a buy here, pay here lot, except they could have really nice cars. And so does it mean that generally speaking, every car they sell is like bad and they're only getting bad client? Not at all. As a matter of fact, they could sell beautiful cars, amazing, one-of-a-kind examples, and they could be super clean and awesome, or they could be complete wrecks. Depends on what the car is. Each car individually should be assessed on its own, not so much based on, oh, this dealer's good or bad. So generally speaking, let's talk about the financial component here. The long-term rental business is a little bit different because you have rental fees, which are huge upfront. So let's say, for example, we'll analyze some of these larger deals that are on the internet so I can show you what that looks like. Let's say you're buying a car for $5.5 million. Now, generally, you can't afford this car, meaning like there's no lender that's gonna give you a $5.5 million loan for a car, especially if the day you're buying this car, its real value of 4.8 million or 4.5. So that means there's $700K right there in lost equity just in the margin for the dealer, which is okay. Listen, this is roughly about 15%. It's not significant, 15, 20%. So there is an opportunity here for someone who says, I don't care, I got enough money, I don't want to buy an SVJ and something else, I want to go straight to Bugatti. No problem. You can do that and you lost that, but it gets worse than that, because what happens is once you put the $2 million down and you start adjusting this for $60K a month fees, here's what ends up happening. In your head, you're looking at this as a conventional conversation where you're saying, I put $2 million down on a 5.5 car. So technically on day one, on the very same day you pick up the car, your car should have 3.5 mil. That should be the actual portion that is unpaid, and the rest of the car, the 2 million you put down, should be equity. So even if you could sell the car for 4 million at a smash, you should immediately have 500K in equity. It doesn't quite work that way. You see, because with these rental agreements, unfortunately, the $2 million isn't much of a down payment. As a matter of fact, I would argue that probably 10% of this is an actual down payment, and the rest of it ends up becoming some kind of fee or pre-bought structure, which means that you're buying either the first 6 months or the last 6 months or some security deposit or something that they figured out a way to get into a fee schedule. So even though at the beginning you're putting 2 million down, you're basically buying your loan for like 1.3 million and are putting 700K down in like equity. Like, just to give you an example, now in addition to that, every payment you make, the majority of it will not actually go to your principal. So even though you've done all this, at the end of the day, you'll have paid all this money, your $2 million, plus this times 12, right? So you're looking at roughly like let's say 800K there in payments in a year time. You paid $2 million there, but the real equity you've built is maybe 700K. This is how we came to the conclusion that Wes Watson was gonna lose $2 million on his Bugatti, and that's assuming he can actually sell it for a good amount, which so far he hasn't been able to, as you can clearly see in the other videos on the internet. So this is a good example of how stupid this model is. But here are reasons why this works really well for a lot of Miami, you could say crazy people, scammers, whatever you call them. This isn't about what they do for a business. It's really on their inability to afford things they can afford and put themselves in positions like this. So the reason this is a problem is because when you have a lot of cash you're making and you're paying 60K a month, it's not a problem because you're making a couple of $100,000 and you're fine. Now, in addition to that, you had some kind of money to put down. Now, in this case, it's extreme for $2 million. Most cars that are like $1.5 to $2 million, and yes, a lot of hypercar Lamborghinis are $3 million cars, 3.5 million, that are actually no more than 1.8 to 2 million in real value cost. Like I bought my Countach $1 million under MSRP. So that means that a brand new Countach, which is one of the most desirable hypercars of Lamborghini, $1 million under MSRP. So think about that. That's how cars trade. Now, don't say, how did you do that? Why is that possible? If you don't understand how to buy cars, just go to Exotic Car Hacks and learn that strategy, because it's not, you don't have to go to auctions, you don't have to do anything. That's just how cars work for ignorant people that don't understand cars. So let's take a moment here and go back here from that $2 million concept down here. So a $2 million car would probably require somewhere around 400 to 500K down for this very same strategy. 500K down would then put you into another, heavy monthly payment, but the same type of losses would constantly be incurred, and it'll be a very hard car to resell because wholesale to retail on a lot of these cars is very, very widespread. That's why they're hypercars. They have large margins. So not only you're paying into the margin, you're paying these monthly payments that never go to the equity, but there's something we haven't talked about, and the reason this kind of works for a lot of specific dealers who are using these strategies to get these young guys who shouldn't be driving these cars in these cars is one key thing, and that is insurance. So most insurance companies won't insure you, and if you have some kind of lending contract, then you basically won't get insured, right? Because you have a lending contract. So the lender will say, where is your good insurance that covers my $2 million car? Oh yeah, no one will insure me because I'm 25 years old. Okay, well, you can't have this car. We need to hit you up with insurance. There's no way you can have this car if you can't get insurance. Otherwise, I'm not even dispensing the funds to pay for your car for you to put your down payment. So what happens next is pretty interesting. A lot of these long-term rental companies, what they'll do is they'll provide you with their insurance and they'll charge you an additional dollar amount to actually be on it. So it's not illegal. They're actually, in many cases, they'll add you. Some are scammy and they won't add you, but some will add you and you'll have legitimate insurance. The argument, though, is that, again, you don't own the car. You'll never see a title to your car. You'll never pay off the car. And part of the reason, then, they use this great strategy to ensure you stay on forever as a client is because you're always, from the very first day you walk out of that place, under negative equity so far up your asshole that you can never sell the car unless they bail you out and lower their fees. So you're ultimately becoming a customer for life just by signing the contract, and you're too stupid to realize it. So here are a couple of things I'll say about that concept. A lot of Miami influencers are trying to teach you to be wealthy and to be rich, but yet they're putting themselves in the worst financial contracts in the world. I have coached many, many students out of these contracts so that they don't get them. I've coached a lot of celebrities out of these contracts so they don't go into them when they send me the paperwork and I look at it and I go, you gotta be out of your fucking mind thinking this is a good idea. And so a lot of times this comes down to this problem. The problem is you got people who have made some type of money, have not been taxed on that money, and are leveraging that money in an attempt to make more money to persuade you by selling you specific financial courses on discipline and being smart and being good with your money and making money, but somehow are putting themselves in the worst financial contracts in history with car dealers. So that's contradictory. Secondly, I think there is nothing wrong with people selling you a course on even how to make money. There are plenty of people that do that, and I'm sure they have solid courses. This isn't an argument to which course is legit, which is not. There are people who teach a lot of great strategies on the internet. They teach Section 8 housing, other people teach real estate, that's conventional, other people teach rentals. I teach watch trading on the internet in order to make money. There are different things people can do to make money. What I'm arguing here is the financial stupidity of this contradicts the ability of good financial decisions because it makes you piss away a ton of money. But here's where everything gets worse. Clearly, you're on social media flaunting cars. Clearly, you're making enough for these down payments in hopes that you'll continue to make money for these huge payments, which you don't qualify for on their bank and you can't get insurance for. But the third worst part about this that people don't see coming and why these influencers disappear every few years, taxes. Basically, they're not getting taxed on their money. So everything they're making on the stuff they're selling digitally, etc., they're just respending and recirculating, but they're not building equity in anything because all this money's gone. So by the time you're done, a couple of, let's say, months later, a year later, or 2 years later, you're done flaunting all this shit on the internet. You want out of it. You're renting the house, you're giving it back, you're done doing this stuff, you made some money. Well, Uncle Sam comes knocking and says, hey, by the way, this is 3 years you haven't filed taxes, and you owe us $17 million according to what we know. And here's the other problem with that, is that you're on the internet flaunting a Bugatti. So there's nothing wrong with flaunting a Bugatti on the internet. I do it every single year. Now, in addition to that, I pay millions of dollars in taxes every single year. So there's a difference between earning a lot of money in a format that is sustainable and upholding it, and just transferring money. Now, the problem with transferring money, which is a very good thing to do as long as you're transferring it in equity positions. If you're buying a ton of real estate that holds its value, and later Uncle Sam comes knocking, you can always sell the real estate and pay for the taxes. The real issue here becomes that when you're actually turning in all of this money you're making into these fee schedules that are other people's pockets, that's how athletes go poor. This is how influencers go to jail, and this is why they disappear off the internet every few years. So do not forget this very simple concept. People can bullshit you all day, every day, but the math, the money, it doesn't lie. It doesn't care about you, me, that I'm rich, how rich, someone's richer, not, etc. I have accumulated a $30 million car collection, one car at a time, $100,000 at a time, over 20 years. It does not happen like, yes, there are people who are going to have one nicer car, for example, but it doesn't change the fact that how you own something is significantly more relevant than what you own. And so, could you turn these long-term rental agreements into short-term? Most people don't keep their cars for more than 6, 12 months. That's what most of these guys do. And this is true, that exotic car owners do not keep their cars that long. We get bored, we keep sliding through cars. That part's normal. But a big portion of this is to understand that financial responsibility comes from understanding that there are steps and specific times at which you can keep moving up the financial ladder. Going up from 0 to this higher financial ladder, the reason it can't be believed by people and the reason people keep asking these questions on the internet is because they don't understand these things actually exist. And less than anything else, they just don't understand how it's possible because in their minds, they don't realize that these kids are just recycling this money until Uncle Sam comes kicking and eventually they have no money. So if you want more financial education like this, that is the key reason why you need to subscribe and like this video, and of course subscribe to this channel. We will continue to debunk the reality of how finance works in the exotic car world for anyone interested in it right here at Exotic Car Hacks.